George and the Dragon, from the adaptation by Brian Conway, illustrated by Tammie, Speer, Lyon. Once upon a time, there lived a boy named George. The Queen of Fairies had taken him in as a baby, and the fairies raised him as their own. They taught him to be brave and a noble knight. At last the time came when George was old enough to seek out his destiny. The Queen of Fairies called him to see her.
"Your journey starts today,"
she told him.
"You have many adventures before you now."
"Yes, Your Majesty."
George bowed before the Queen. He was sad to leave the land of the fairies, but he was not afraid. In his travels, George heard countless stories of the hardship that had befallen the kingdom of Lyon. George decided that was where he was needed most and headed on his way. When George reached Lyon, he found that a high wall enclosed the castle and the small city around it. He saw no one at all except for a young lady who had rushed out to meet him.
"You would do well to leave here now and never return,"
said the lady.
"But I have come to help you,"
George replied,
"even if it costs me my life."
"Very well. I am Princess Sabra,"
she said. The princess told George why the kingdom lived in fear. A dragon had slain their king and now kept the villagers captive inside the city walls. The dragon demanded that he be given 2 sheep to eat each day, or he would eat the people themselves for his dinner.
"We gave up our last 2 sheep this morning,"
continued the princess.
"Tomorrow we shall have nothing to give the dragon, and we shall all perish. What's more,"
she went on,
"the dragon cannot be killed by sword alone. His scales are tougher than steel. Many have already died trying to defeat him."
Suddenly, George remembered a gift the fairy queen had given him. It was an hourglass filled with tiny blue grains of sand that looked as cold as ice. The hourglass bore an inscription which read, "There is one way to save the rest. The serpent's weakness is in his breath." George and Sabra hurried to the dragon's lair.
"The time left in the hourglass will lead us,"
George whispered.
"We must wait until all the sand has dropped through. Then we should know what to do."
"We should know?"
Sabra asked.
"And what shall happen if we don't?"
George and Sabra arrived at the dragon's lair just as the dragon awoke from a deep slumber. As the dragon stretched and yawned a great fiery yawn, the very last tiny blue grain of sand was dropping through the hourglass. George knew what must be done. He threw the hourglass at the dragon's yawning mouth. It shattered on the dragon's tongue in a cloud of icy mist. The magical hourglass, which had actually contained crystals of frozen time, instantly froze shut the dragon's mouth. He had to live the rest of his days deep beneath the warm waters of a nearby lake, so that he would not freeze from the inside out. George has saved the kingdom. In her gratitude, Sabra offered George all the riches she possessed. But George wanted no payment for his deeds.
"I have many more adventures left to face,"
George told Sabra.
"They are my greatest reward."
The end.